Welcome to Be Bold America. Our program today is Tuesday, the choice between two Americas with Bette Dangerous. What will our lives be like in our country if Trump wins? What will our lives be like in our country if Harris wins? And if Harris wins, what will our life be like after the voters reject the billionaire-funded Republican candidate and their right-wing Agenda 47 and Project 2025? It has come to this. After 50 years of implementing a velvet coup, this Tuesday we have been forced into deciding between two very different Americas. Elect Harris-Walz, and we continue with the democracy and the rule of law our founders designed. Elect Trump-Vance, and our original form of government is gone, and an authoritarian regime supplants it as being above the law. Our Supreme Court has already helped this along and implemented a coup from the court by determining a president is above the law for official acts, whatever they are. As Judge J. Michael Luttig, retired conservative judge from the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, stated recently, a vote for Trump is a vote for fascism and a betrayal of American democracy and for everything it stands. We have big things to do. Our bold interview guest today is Bette Dangerous, also known as Heidi Sigmund Kuda. Heidi is an Emmy award-winning investigative reporter, filmmaker, and best-selling author. She writes about politics, culture, and authors her Bette Dangerous Substack magazine, where she hosts events with global authors, historians, filmmakers, and geopolitical analysts. Her community events focus on pro-democracy activism and exposing information warfare. Learn more about Heidi Kuda at BetteDangerous.com, and Betty is spelled B-E-T-T-E, BetteDangerous.com, or BylineSupplement.com. Bette Dangerous, welcome to Be Bold America.
Thank you so much, Jill. I'm so excited to be with you today.
Oh, the excitement is on our side, too. Well, Heidi, why don't you first tell us about how Bette Dangerous was created and what does she do?
Thank you so very much for that. I was a campaign manager in 2022 in a very hard-fought city council race. And when we won, I had the opportunity to go to City Hall, but I would no longer be able to spend my days battling what I call the fascist creep and speaking truth to power as an independent investigative reporter. And I made a round of calls, and one of them was to our mutual friend, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who's a very practical person, but
yes.
She told me...
Love her.
Oh, my gosh. With her right now, Lucid's meeting, her Substack group is meeting right now, and we're both with her in spirit. Ruth told me that she felt I would be in terrible anguish if I couldn't publicly comment, so I launched a Substack, and for the name, I used the very first headline I created in the very first post I made about the Women's March in 2017. It was titled Bette Dangerous and Other Women Who March. And Bette, of course, comes from Bette Davis. I was on the plane to Washington watching Dangerous. Dangerous was the film she made where she won her first Oscar. I'm a total cinephile, but people like Bette Davis really give me a lot of courage. She took on the system. She ultimately won, and she is one of my many muses in this battle we find ourselves in.
That's a great story. So tell me, one thing I wanted to do is there's so much I wanted to talk with you about. I have a list of things, and I just wanted this to be kind of a fast pace, get your analysis so we can get through a lot of topics. Yeah. However, I wanted to get your analysis on if Trump wins, if Harris wins, and if Harris wins, what would be like with the right wing still, because these people aren't going away. So one of the first things is, if Trump wins, what is your analysis on Congress?
Ooh, well, if Trump wins, we can expect 1,000 years of darkness. That is my first feeling. Life will be nasty, brutish, and short, while oligarchs become the new feudal lords. He will enact all the promises he made to the Christian supremacists who propped him up. Both me and Matthew D. Taylor, who just wrote a book about Christian supremacy. Mike Johnson's the guy who keeps us up late at night. That, of course, is our fear. So if you have a Trump presidency and a Johnson-run Congress, then America will cease to exist as we once knew it. 250 years of democracy disappears. And that's, of course, if we turn over our power without a fight. And I don't know, we're going to see what we're made of, as Ruth always says, never underestimate the American people. So let's see what we're made of. But we know he's not going to waste any time targeting his revenge list and executing his plans to round up millions of our neighbors. And with a Congress, if Republicans maintain a hold on Congress, we're in a lot of trouble.
Well, another goal, not only is his revenge, but another goal is just to impoverish the middle class. When Reagan started, the middle class was at 66%. Today, it's at 43%. And that downward trend, and what really people feel and get angry about because they've been pushed out of the middle class, is it will continue. What if Harris wins? What would Congress be like?
I was going to say, yes, feudalism is what we face, some kind of medieval-style feudalism. So those numbers you just gave will get far worse. So if Harris and Walz win, okay, first we pause and celebrate. We exhale because we owe ourselves that, but only for an hour. David Pepper, who I'm sure is a mutual friend of ours, told me that this is trench warfare. We get back into the trenches. Of course, if they win, Democratic governance continues, but we will still need all the down ticket winners. We need the House. We need the Senate. We need all of that because we need to be able to enact deep structural reforms because we need to upgrade our country. We are in a country that needs some deep reforms, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But I would say the first thing we do is we impeach a pair of the criminals on the Supreme Court.
Well, also, I think one of the things that I think's happened to Congress even today is that they've driven out of the Republican Party, they've driven out anybody that's reasonable. And I really look at it as currently as a psychopathic party. That, and it might seem unusual to talk about that, but when I wrote my first book, America Abandoned, I wrote about John Ronson, a Welsh journalist, had written a book called The Psychopathic Test. And he learned that about 1% of the general population are psychopaths. However, and I didn't think that sounded too badly, and then he goes on and talked about that they're attracted to the limelight. So there are a disproportionate number of psychopaths that can be found in top-tier corporation management, in power positions in financial institutions, and in state and federal politics. And I just see the entire Republican Party having pushed out anybody reasonable, having some degree of these abnormal behavior. And the 99% of us are just being pushed around, like being domestically abused. And just one more thought on that. There was a study in Australia in Bond University, and they found that 21% of our CEOs have clinically significant levels of psychopathic traits. So this is something I don't think many people think about or talk about, but I think we need to realize more that we're not dealing with people that are normal or have the same kind of value system that we do. So I think that's something else that Harris will be dealing with.
You know what? I'm so thrilled that you brought that up. I have a podcast partner who basically says we've sorted our sociopaths to the top.
Yes,
and we've
there
done
you go.
that by removing empathy, by removing community. Part of information warfare is designed to make people not have trust in each other and in institutions and have replace it with fear and all of that, which is very easy for the MAGA cult to then radicalize millions of people. But when you're talking about I think it's completely fair not to refer to this party as the GOP or Republican Party anymore. That still brings up an era of Eisenhower Republicans. They don't exist anymore. What we are dealing with now are those who were propped up, and some of them hatched in, Koch think tanks. But as Nancy McLean explained it to me, who wrote Democracy
I
and
loved
Change,
her, yes.
She's a genius, of course, right? Nancy explained it to me as you have this Koch cadre, you have all of that money, and then it's like a pincher, she said, and then you have the Fox news outrage factory at the bottom of this, and in between it are the politicians. And what they've done is that Koch money and the Fox outrage machine have squeezed out anybody who was more of a centrist or willing to, put their hand across the aisle. And you'll know that we had so many members of this party, formerly known as the Republican Party, who actually did not try to run for re-election. They realized that this MAGA cult, this thing that had been nurtured and hatched out of these, oligarch think tanks, essentially replaced any of what we used to call the, moderates or the more reasoned conservatives. They're not there anymore, and they lost out to the Boeberts and the Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was completely a cynical QAnon operative, and J.D. Vance is somebody who was literally hatched out of a Peter Thiel orchestrated think tank. And I think it's very important that we talk about the sociopathy and the psychopathy because, as we started, if Trump wins, when I say 1,000 years of darkness, I'm not lying. We need to be a country with empathy and a shared narrative of truth. Under that type of leadership, we won't be.
Well, it is recognized by George Conway because he started the anti-psychopath pack. You just have to call it the Psychopath Party. Well, you touched on Fox News, so let's jump to the media and Fox News. And one thing, Fox so-called news, one thing that David Brock said of Ailes is that he was a political operative in a newsman's suit. And that,
wow.
And he treated journalism as politics, just another way to market and monetize it. Not that there was going to be any news there. And one other quote by Ailes was, "We have no obligation to tell the viewer anything not to our advantage." So, the truth might not be to their advantage. They have, I just recently saw Hannity's show on Fox News, and they just tell their viewers, you will be outraged. He just said that. Yeah. You will be outraged. Right. You will be angry by this. Blah, blah, blah. You'll be, and then goes and explains something that's completely not true. And if it was, you would be outraged. But it's not true. So then you have the Washington Post, just, I guess, democracy dies in the light, not in the darkness, because they didn't. And then the media in general, you wrote, as a matter of fact, love doesn't sell as much as hate. And you also wrote something that the media ate itself. So talk to me about the media, Fox News. Yeah.
Thank you. I worked within a local Fox affiliate in Los Angeles for 15 years. So this is one of my areas I'd like to think of expertise, as Jen Sanko, a mutual friend of ours.
Yeah, she's been on the show too.
I know she did. She loves you. She says hello.
Oh, good.
She absolved
hello,
me
Jen.
of all my pain over that by saying someone had to be on the inside, and it may as well have been me. I wrote an article called Confessions of a Fox Blonde, where I talk about the journey. And the bottom line is we can't talk about media if we're not talking about big business. And in the 80s, there was still a lot of mom and pops. I'm sure you remember that beautiful era. My very first journalism job was with the Point Reyes Light. I was an intern. I was chasing down colts and feral pigs and having a great time. And that world doesn't exist anymore. What has happened is we now have to talk about media as big business. And big business has bet on fascism, even though, as Jason Stanley has taught us, fascism doesn't benefit anybody. It certainly doesn't benefit the media companies, because if they want your company, like in Orban's Hungary, they will come and get it. In Orban's Hungary, they basically told media owners they had to donate their companies to the state-run department, and guess what disappeared in Hungary? Free speech. So that's a first piece of it. The other piece is we have to talk about techno-fascism. There's no way to not link the tech oligarchs with this disappearance, or this obeying in advance, I should say. When you talk about WAPO and the LA Times, you're talking about some tech oligarchs who obeyed in advance. We all saw it. We're never going to forget it. I'm certainly not going to forget it. But something brilliant happened in September. Our State Department, our U.S. State Department, gave us the 6 perfect words we need to begin reforming this stuff. They basically said covert influence activities are not journalism. Therefore, all
excellent.
that Russian covert.
Can you say that again? Say that again.
Yes, I will say it. I will make a poem about it. Covert influence activities are not journalism. So when you have Elon Musk and J.D. Vance, who funded a site called Rumble with Peter Thiel, which does nothing but Russian propaganda all day, when you have those two screaming censorship and free speech, that's not what they're talking about. They have been allowing and enabling their platforms to do covert influence operations. How do we know that? Because RT was indicted. How do we know that? Because Tenet Media, which was swept up in the RT indictment, which has half a dozen influencers being paid millions of dollars through various Russian cutouts, that we just learned is not journalism. So we don't want that stuff. It's like giving Tokyo Rose a bullhorn and saying, have at it. You are just as important as President Biden, and that is not the case. And now we have something from our, enforcement agencies, which begins to kind of give us the backbone we need to start actually going back and reevaluating what is free speech. And if you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, then you can't enable covert influence operations on your platforms, in my opinion.
I really hate to take a break right now, but you are listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7, 89.5, and 89.7 FM. Many voices, one station serving the California Central Coast. Listen globally online from the KSQD.org website. Our topic today is Tuesday, the choice between two Americas with Bette Dangerous. And we're speaking with that very Bette Dangerous, also known as Heidi Sigmund Kuda, about this Tuesday's presidential election and the consequences she foresees. Heidi is an Emmy award-winning investigative reporter. And visit BetteDangerous.com, that's BETTE, dangerous.com, or BylineSupplement.com. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
What an election.
Tuesday, November 5th will be a night to remember. And from 5 to 10 p.m. and perhaps beyond, join me, Rachel Ann Goodman,
Tony Russomanno,
and Eric Nelson as we host a radio election night party.
and everyone is invited.
Tuesday night, K-Squid will be Command Central, welcoming everyone to join us on air, off air, and everywhere as we watch history being made before our eyes.
So turn your TV on, but turn the volume down and be sure to tune into KSQD from at least 5 to 10 p.m.
We are all in this together, and together, election night, we'll all be there for each other.
And that's what K-Squid, the voice of our Monterey Bay community, is built for.
We're back. Would you like a friend to hear this interview on Tuesday? The Choice Between Two Americas with Bette Dangerous. Be Bold America is available as a podcast. Subscribe for free from your favorite podcast platform or listen to the show at Be Bold America's homepage on the KSQD.org website. Also, KSQD is proud to announce that we now have a mobile app so that you may listen to your favorite show anytime from your smartphone. You can download the app from the App Store or visit ksqd.org/ksqd.app. Now, Bette Dangerous, there's so much more to talk about media, but I would like to move to the whole thing about mass deportation.
Yeah, well,
this is all they have right now as a platform.
Yeah, that is genocidal language. You don't have mass deportation without having mass deaths. You don't have camps without having people who have medical emergencies. And I have been doing so much reading about the last winter of the Weimar Republic. And one of the lessons that I took from that is that these grave diggers, as they call them, they didn't have to triumph. So we right now are in this beautiful, incredible moment, this historic moment where these authoritarians do not have to triumph. We can still stop the worst from happening. As you know, when Hitler got into power on January 30th of 1933, it was only 2 months later that he already populated one of his camps, Dachau, with his enemies, with political enemies. So Trump was not able to execute all the things he wanted to do in that first term because there were still enough people within who pushed back against him. He had an insurrection, as you might recall. As Ruth says, we memory hole a lot of these things. What he will try to gin up in the next administration, should he get into power, which I still do not even really want to entertain or even put into the universe, but, we have to face it. This is nothing less than genocidal talk. This is nothing less than, in my mind, him talking in Holocaust terms. When you round up 15 million people, that is what he's saying. When you call people vermin, that is what he's saying. When you hold a Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden, those are the things that he is saying. And I would rather be the person who sounds the alarm and have people think I'm an alarmist than underestimate just how violent that a second Trump administration could be. His revenge list already is something that is causing the people that you and I know and love to already be thinking, is my passport good? Do I need to get out of the country? Because, as you know, Tom Hartman, read that letter.
Yes.
Writing a sort of a hypothetical letter a year from now to his wife.
From jail, from prison. Mm-hmm.
And that's all very real, because all we have to do is look at Hungary and Russia and Belarus and see Trump aligning with this new axis of evil to know that we can't. I guess the simplest way to put it is people already forgot that he didn't care if we lived or died during COVID, and hundreds of thousands of people perished because he was not there every day dealing with the reality of science. Disinformation was coming out of the White House, and people died. People who watched Fox had a higher risk of dying. There have been multiple studies on that I've reported on. So to think that, his better angels will, avail themselves, or that he will pivot, quote unquote, or that he will be containable, none of that is real. It's all very, very serious and very, very dangerous.
Before I get on to what you think about deportation or the immigration issue, when I get to what our country would look like if Harris wins, I did do some research, and I wanted to give listeners an idea of what he's talking about in deporting and putting into camps 15 million people. So, for example, Montana is 1,143,000. New Hampshire is 1,405,000. Idaho is 1,600,000. Mississippi's 2,940,000. Colorado is 5,915,000. That only adds up to 10,063,000. So you add in Wyoming, 586,000. Vermont, 648,000. West Virginia, 1,766,000. That only gets us to 13 million. If you throw in New Mexico, 2,115,000, that gets us to 15 million people. He's talking about putting in camps the states of the populations of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 states.
Yeah.
I mean, people need to grasp this is a big country, and people need to grasp the size and what kind of industry would be created. Talk about a prison industry we have today.
Yeah. Well, in my research back in maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I learned that Robert Mercer, who is one of the oligarchs who funds a lot of this stuff, Cambridge Analytica, Breitbart, etc., he profited off of the privatization, you say the word.
Easy for you to say.
Making
privatization, yes.
He profited off of that. And so there is a lot of, and also in studying the business elite that supported Hitler, they all profited off the camps. They profited off of what he called the Aryanization of Germany. They were able to get businesses for very little if they were non-Aryan owned. So there was a lot of greed and power involved. And the immigrants that I would like to see deported are not our neighbors, are not our friends, the people of our community. I would like to see Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and Rupert Murdoch deported. They've been nothing but bad for our country.
And they weren't born here. Musk was an illegal alien when he came.
Musk was not born here. Thiel wasn't born here. Murdoch wasn't born here. And yet they have made their billions in America, and yet they are so dangerous for our shared narrative of truth. We don't have a shared narrative of truth because of the people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and Rupert Murdoch. And honestly, they have been so endangering our national security for a number of years that go ahead and deport those three, but leave my neighbors alone. And bottom line is that I don't believe Stalin ever said it, but there's a quote that, one death is a tragedy and a million is, statistics.
Right.
Politics.
I've heard that.
And it's almost impossible for us to even think in these terms, but we must think in these terms. Again, you and I both, I'm sure, studied Timothy Snyder, and I learned a couple of things a few years ago. One of them is that famines are political. The other is that when Stalin mass murdered millions of people, no one did anything. He got away with it. We don't want to even test the possibilities of what Trump is meaning to do with this, but we know if we peel it back, there will be power, there will be greed, there will be the business elite who think they will profit off of this. But if they are listening, I would like to give them one little cautionary footnote. The 40 business elite who propped up Hitler and got him into power, the primary sources, many of them were executed by hanging,
yes,
bombed in their bunkers, life in prison, or committed suicide. Things don't end well when you prop up a genocidal dictator.
So I'm sure that there won't be mass deportation if Harris wins, but what other thoughts do you have on immigration and what the right wing would still try to do?
Well, I'm sure that you recall that there was a bipartisan border bill, but because of politics and because of Mike Johnson's fealty to Donald Trump, there was no interest in actually solving this problem, which I look at us as a country of beautiful immigrants, and I don't see the problems the way that people see them. I see my parents are immigrants. My parents came from World War II Germany. Newsflash, Germans make great Americans. There's of these people that we're talking about. These are people who come from impoverished countries in order to try to feed their families. So I don't see this. I see so much of this as ginned-up crises, as culture wars. I think Harris, who's a prosecutor and sensible and very smart, with her empathetic vice president, will work very hard to solve the things that really need to be solved and prioritized in this country. And I am so looking forward to 8 years of looking at both their beautiful faces. They just bring joy, and even looking at them on a stage together. We have been living under this fear and these culture wars and a lot of things that really aren't where our priorities should be. Our priorities should be in making sure Ukraine wins in the war that Russia is waging on their soil, making sure our European allies know that they can trust us, and putting an emphasis on really in earnest combating global warming, because above all of that is, above all of this conversation is the fact that our earth is in peril and we need leadership that's willing to actually address it. Trump represents all of the fossil fuel interests. With Harris, Walz, and the down ticket wins, if we get the House and the Senate, we can actually, in earnest, begin to take on the things that are really meaningful.
Well,
it won't include mass deportation.
Well, let's talk about that after the break. You're listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7, 89.5, and 89.7 FM. Many voices, one station serving the California Central Coast. Listen globally online from the ksqd.org website. We are interviewing Bette Dangerous, also known as Heidi Sigmund Kuda. Heidi is an Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter, filmmaker, and best-selling author. We'll be right back after Jim Hightower's commentary titled, "Can Our Elections Be Made Even More Vapid? Some are banking on it." I'm your host, Jill Cody.
Many people feel that America's political campaigns have become vapid PR hustles with little connection to the real-life concerns of workaday people. Luckily, Adam Swart says he has the fix for such voter malaise. Just add a more professional level of vapidity to the process, he says, and you can reduce the need for having actual voters involved in campaigning. Swart is a for-hire politico who's been hailed as a visionary and a business rock star for launching an outfit he calls Crowds on Demand. His entrepreneurial concept is as simple as it is devious. Rather than the tedium of strategizing and organizing people into grassroots campaigns, just pay his COD team to stage a movement, like Hollywood would do. Indeed, Swart's operation is even headquartered in the center of Hollywood make-believe Beverly Hills. But let him sell his own product. He says he can create and staff a turnkey political front group for clients. We provide everything, exclaims COD's website, including the people, the materials, and even the ideas. We can help you plan the strategy and execute it. How happy if you're a corporate schemer needing to win or defeat a proposal, but you don't have any grassroots base of support. Crowds on Demand promises to fake it for you. We can set up protests, rallies, demonstrations, and even create nonprofit organizations to advance your agenda. It's basically an AstroTurf campaign operation, but with even less turf and more plastic. This is Jim Hightower saying, if there's one thing the American majority would agree on today, it is that the last thing our political system needs is more PR trickery, issue fakery, and political hustlers. How about we give a little more honesty a try? The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you subscribers to Jim Hightower's Lowdown on Substack. Find us at jimhightower.substack.com.
We're back. Our topic today is Tuesday, the choice between two Americas with Bette Dangerous. And our bold guest today is that very Bette Dangerous, also known as Heidi Sigmund-Kuda. Heidi is an Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter, filmmaker, and best-selling author. Now, Heidi, before we move on, do you have any thoughts after hearing Jim Hightower's commentary?
Oh, my gosh. Well, I think about, Trump and his indoctrination event, selling Bibles made in China, gold in tennis shoes, and unfortunately fascism. But I also was thinking how some of these think tanks, when I've heard like the undercover video of what they discuss, in these conversations, it sounds a lot like that. For some of them, I'm sure you remember the Craigslist crowds that were, early on in Trump's attempt to run for presidency. It was literally like, here's $10 and a T-shirt, and here we are, unfortunately, with a cult that has built up around him using some of these confidence man and Elmer Gantry style techniques. The good news is I think the metrics have been trending downward on him for a very long time. So we'll see. We're still on election eve here.
Well, also the metrics of something trending down has been the climate crisis. We were just starting to talk about that. And, one thing, too, is language, because climate change, I don't use that. Al Gore doesn't use it. Greta Thunberg doesn't use it, because that was a focus group, oil industry phrase, because the climate always changes, right? It's something to make it less urgent. And so climate crisis, climate emergency, those are the words. And I know you probably even read George Lakoff's Little Blue Book. He talked about language being so important. And so the climate crisis. So what's your ideas on if Trump wins, Harris wins? And if Harris wins, what will it still be like for her when it comes to this?
It's so important, like I was saying earlier, to put global warming as the layer that goes on top of this climate crisis, climate catastrophe. All of those are, I think, the proper framing. I realize that what we are seeing is the last gasp of the patriarchy as funded by the fossil fuel oligarchs. They know global warming is real. They've known it's been real for decades, and they have spent billions of dollars to interfere with our understanding of these realities. And yet, what do we see every day? Another climate catastrophe. And I believe part of why we've been enduring all of these culture wars, etc., that are literally ginned up daily, something new from the professional propagandists that the media seems to be addicted to. As we've been focusing there, these same oligarchs, these tech and fossil fuel oligarchs, they have been capturing Earth's resources. They'll continue to capture Earth's resources. They expect our civilization to suffer, and they plan to be in their Hawaiian and New Zealand bunkers. And that is not the future. I don't want that future for us. I want smart leaders who are into action. You'll recall Trump took us out of the Paris Accord. Biden put us back in. One of the headlines that was very meaningful to me but was completely ignored by the media. You know who's been trying to save the North Atlantic right whale? Joe Biden. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been trying to save the whale. They put $82 million toward trying to save a North Atlantic right whale from extinction. That's really important because I would actually like to live on a planet that includes such beautiful things as monarch butterflies and whales. And Trump, if you look at the first administration, he got an F on every single environmental metric. He put denialists, climate change denialists, in positions of power. Harris, I'm sure, and Walz will put actual scientists in positions of climate crises power. And honestly, the whole reason I even started doing this work independently after I thought I was going to get out of investigative journalism. Certainly I got out of corporate investigative journalism, but they pulled me back in because I did a stint working for Al Jazeera America's Techno Show, where I learned just how urgent our climate crisis is. I produced a whole bunch of half-hour specials on this, and I realized that unless we have leaders, big, bold leadership, we are just going to see a very bumpy ride down. And the bottom line, really, is it's up to us. All of us can do our part with or without leadership. We should all be doing our part, and it starts with, are we willing to change some key things about our lifestyles? And for anybody listening who wonders what they can do, the first thing you can actually do, obviously, vote democratically up and down the ballot, but also, if you can, work close to home, work from home, do the things that you can do to reduce your carbon footprint, but we actually need to be doing that on a mass level. We will not do that if the new axis of evil is running the world. We have a chance if we have Kamala and Walz running America. We really do. We have a good shot.
You've got
it's going to require all of us.
You've got my mind just so going in so many different ways. If the first thing I wanted to say is the computer models, even if these oligarchs are in their bunkers, the computer models estimate that there won't be any fish in the ocean by 2048.
Yeah.
You know, so if we've overfished and the oceans are too warm to for the fish to live, and there are oxygen-deprived areas of the ocean as well, which I wrote about in my book, Climate Abandoned. You know, that's just 24 years away, people. And so they're not going to make it in their bunkers either. The other thing that came up for me when you were saying that Harris Walz would have scientists, but didn't SCOTUS, didn't the Supreme Court just reverse the Chevron doctrine?
Yes, and yes. They have done so much damage in a pretty short period of time.
Now, to explain the Chevron doctrine was that departments, the federal departments, can use experts in their fields and then base their rules, their regulations, and their decisions and policies based on scientific and expert opinions. The Chevron doctrine, what the Supreme Court just did was say, nope, can't use experts.
Right. Do you know why Mike Johnson keeps me up at night? I did a deep dive investigation into him. It's called Bad Bones. You can search Mike Johnson, Bad Bones, and my name, Heidi Kuda, and you can find it. CUDA. It is because I opened with him. He was doing the legal work for something called Ark Encounter. And Ark Encounter is some like amusement park in Kentucky where they're basically, it exists to sort of create an imaginary, vision of, people and dinosaurs, hanging out. And it completely tries to debunk anything scientifically based. And it's part of how this disinformation is, spread throughout various communities and anti-scientific information. And Mike Johnson is part of that religious extremism which wants to have dominion over the earth. So they don't care what the reality is. They think that they're going to have dominion over the earth. And the fossil fuel oligarchs know that the window is short, so they want to extract as much wealth as they possibly can. And you're right, it's not good for anybody. It's not good for them. It's not good for the families of the oligarchs. It's certainly not good for us. And, nothing short of a complete rethink of how we do things is going to make any impact. And really, we need science and physics to be our guiding light in how we address this, not religious extremists like Mike Johnson, who's a heartbeat away from the presidency. That is so incredibly un-American to have somebody who is absolutely such an extremist and so completely and totally anti-science, anti-education, anything that actually is at the heart and foundation of what built America.
Well, he has another form of psychopathy. He has no compassion, humility, empathy. It's all his whatever so-called religion that he's got to follow. I wanted to mention, because you talk about the oligarchs, and I heard Kara Swisher quote, it was so great. She talked about the billionaires, the oligarchs. She said, they're so poor, they only have money.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, you can't eat money. You can't fish money. And honestly, if
you can't breathe money, you can't drink clean water.
And if that's all that you want, just power and money, then that is one heck of an empty existence. Mm-hmm. And that is why my column last week, I called it American Redemption. And what I did was I actually turned to Americans of faith, particularly Christians, and said, you need to be the ones that literally get us out of this jam, because you allow the extremists in your various faiths to actually bring us to the brink of all of this insanity. So we need you to lead us out of it. And thankfully, there are many Christian leaders and people of faith who are actually trying to alert people to the dangers of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And we are seeing more and more people, even in recent days, who are coming out in support of Kamala and Walz. And what we're really seeing is pigs flying. Like, did we ever expect to see Dick Cheney? Did we ever expect to see Liz Cheney sitting there next to Kamala Harris? Did we ever expect the urgency that warrants it? And, again, Jason Stanley is one of my muses, and he basically said that women are going to have to lead this charge. And I don't know about you, Jill, but I'm seeing signs that women are leading the charge. Women in the South, long lines of women who do not like to see what's happening to women in their states when they are denied health care rights.
Well, we've become second-class citizens and virtually property again. I have so much more I want to talk about. And after the break, I want to talk about voting. So let's do the break. If you are just joining us, my bold guest today is Bette Dangerous, also known as Heidi Sigmund Kuda, about this Tuesday's presidential election and the consequences she foresees. Heidi is an Emmy award-winning investigative reporter, filmmaker, and best-selling author, and you may reach Heidi at LinkedIn or know more at bylinesupplement.com. You are listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7, 89.5, and 89.7 FM, serving the California Central Coast. Many voices, one station. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
And keep on listening to KSQD this evening. Coming up at 6 p.m. is State of Mind, hosted by Santa Cruz licensed psychotherapist Deborah Sloss. This month is a look at the impact of social media on teen mental health. It's a powerful topic widely covered in the media, but this isn't your typical discussion. In this program, teens themselves take center stage, sharing their real-life experiences, insights, and challenges. You'll hear from Nico Sidaret, an 18-year-old mental health advocate and founder of Unite, along with 3 other young adults, and Harvard psychologist and researcher Dr. Emily Weinstein. It's a unique perspective on how social media both supports and challenges youth mental well-being. Parents, teachers, and others can dive into the complex realities behind the headlines and gain fresh insights on how to better understand and support the digital lives of today's teens. That's State of Mind this evening at 6 p.m. on KSQD 90.7, 89.7, and 89.5 FM and KSQD.org.
Well, Heidi, in these last few minutes, I usually like to ask what ideas you have for us to keep doing, stop doing, and start doing, but I still have another topic, and that's on voting. I had actually lots of topics that we didn't get to, but one was voting, and the reason I wanted to bring it up is a person that I had interviewed on this show a couple of years ago. Her name's Lisa Fontana, and she wrote a book called Me, the People. And she asked me to talk about this today because what she's finding is that young and current non-voters are not comfortable to walk in to cast their vote into government buildings. They say government buildings are scary. Actually, she had a niece, a 20-year-old niece, that was afraid to vote because going into the government buildings was scary, and the direct quote from her niece was, "If you breathe wrong, they'll know and something bad will happen." This was brought up in a class that she was in, and many of the young people in the class had the same fear. So, she just wanted us to talk about that. This is one of the greatest barrier to young and new and non-voting people. So any thoughts on that, and what other thoughts do you have on voting?
As the mother of 2 20-something-year-olds, social anxiety is real. They grew up with it. So it's not only the distrust of government, because if you think about what they've had to endure for probably the majority of their lives, it can be pretty scary stuff. And they've also grown up with an internet unfiltered, where we've given our foreign adversaries direct access to the minds of our citizens, and that's not been good. So social anxiety is real, and I can also understand the hesitation they must feel. But I will say that the blessings of most of the states in this United States, they don't have to have any interaction. You can literally request your ballot, pop it in the mail, bring it to a drop box. And if they would do one thing for me, if young people are listening, watch the documentary on John Lewis that came out in, I think, 2017, Good Trouble. Bottom line is that our vote is a gift. It is a sacred blessing. And this election could conceivably be the last free and fair election we have. If you're of voting age, vote for democracy, vote for Kamala and Walz, vote for the continuation of democratic governance, so you can get to a place where these buildings may seem a bit less scary, but just know that you don't have to wait in a long line necessarily, that you can vote by mail, that you can vote. Most of the polling stations have been open for days. You don't have to wait till Election Day. But I'm glad you brought that up, because that's certainly going to give us something to work on and think about after democracy continues on Tuesday.
Well, and I also think, if Trump wins, I don't think there's going to be voting anymore. It would be fake voting like in Russia.
Yeah,
where Putin gets 97% of the vote, so...
No, super quick. It's very important that people know that the reason Hillary Clinton was the first virtually assassinated candidate, and virtual, I mean by the virtual battlefield of information warfare, is because in 2011, she wanted an international investigation into Putin's 2011 elections, which she knew were fraudulent. In 2013, we voted her our favorite political candidate in the United States. By 2016, after a deluge of information warfare, people didn't like her voice, or they just associated her with Benghazi or her
emails, the emails, yeah,
her emails, all, the whole thing, the perfect storm of, absolute, I'm trying to use a word that is not bad, but awfulness. And suddenly the out of work actor who is in line with all the oligarchs and, the fake rich guy laundering money for the Russian mob seems to be the candidate. And it's nothing to be dismissive about. Information warfare is real, and the most important thing I'd love to make sure I say is these social media platforms must become public utilities. We used to be able to do big things in America, break up monopolies, deal with robber barons. The owners of these companies have proven they're not fit for purpose. We use them to communicate. They must become public utilities for America to get back to that shared narrative of truth.
Well, and voting has been something the Republican Party has hated since the 80s. I mean, Paul Weyrich even said, the more people vote, the less we win, that we don't want to see people voting. I'm paraphrasing. Right. So whatever they can do to take votes away, suppress it, steal it, get them off the rolls. But if Harris wins, I think we'd have a better chance of passing is it the John Lewis Voting Act?
Voting Rights Act.
Voting Rights Act, yes. Of course, we'd need a yes. Democratic Senate and House as well.
What we need to do is awaken the sleeping giant of the 100 million people who didn't turn out in 2016, and I feel like we're doing that, because if we get a crushing victory on Tuesday, then all the think tank made noodling of all the margins won't matter. If we don't have the type of turnout we need, then all of that will matter. But I feel like, in the last few months, many of us have done our jobs. We've warned people, and I'm seeing women vote in incredible numbers, Republican women who I know personally voting for Harris. I am also seeing young people who seem to be aware of the stakes, who are willing to actually, brave the process and, vote for, basically for democracy to continue.
Well, Heidi, in our last 3 minutes or so, what should we keep doing, stop doing, and start doing? What are your thoughts on? Yeah.
Great. Keep doing. First thing, keep canvassing. We still have a couple of days. I'm not sure when this is going to air, but keep canvassing.
Oh, it's airing now. You're live.
Door knocks matter. There's millions of doors that have not been, doorbells have not been rung, doors have not been knocked on. That personal conversation that you have face to face brings people out on election day. So continue canvassing, continue phone banking. That is all very, very important. So we need to continue doing that. What we need to stop doing is doom scrolling. We need to stop allowing our heads to be filled with negativity and fear and whatever the outrage of the day is. Go ahead and look and see what's on your feed, see what's useful, connect with your allies, but in real life contact is where it's at. All the people I know who are not in despair at this moment, guess what they've been doing? They've been driving through the night to get to Harris Walls rallies. They've been participating in the labor of democracy, phone banking, canvassing, postcarding. They're all feeling pretty good right now. Those who are doom scrolling, not participating in the labor of democracy, are in fear. Fear is a very disabling feeling, and I always say that despair is the enemy of action. So we need to get out of that by staying in action. So that answers, I think, the first part of that. And then the last part of it for me is simply that Ann Nelson, who wrote Shadow Network, told me a year ago, everybody in the country needs to form book clubs. I did that. We read a book a week. I have the most informed community at Bette Dangerous, and we, with that knowledge, share it with our networks. And wow, get America reading a book again, and nothing can stop us.
And stop getting your news on social media.
There you go.
That's another thing. Stop believing the nonsensical rantings of a lunatic mind, which is Trump. Stop believing this. And, the one thing that I wanted to share also, just as before we we finish up, is that the work of Thomas Frank, he's a psychiatrist with Georgetown University. He wrote Bush on the Couch, Obama on the Couch, Trump on the Couch. And he said Trump is a destroyer, that his personality, from a trained psychiatrist, he is a destroyer. And he was that as a child. He destroyed other children's toys. He collected, his father put him in military school because he was collecting knives, leaving and going to Manhattan at night and collecting knives. And he said, I can't control this kid. He's going to military school. When you think of him as a destroyer, he will destroy our democracy, he will destroy our country, and he'll destroy our planet. And that's one thing that he's working towards. So that is another reason that we need to be aware of the differences between Trump and Harris. Thank you so much, Heidi. You know, as Timothy Snyder, professor of history at Yale University, recently stated, if Trump wins, America ends. Correct. And I wish I could say if Harris wins, our democratic republic is saved and we need not worry anymore. But these people aren't going to go away, and we need to continue the fight. Democracy's worked. We've been here for nearly 250 years. We've been an example to the world. Democracy is the only form of government that guarantees our freedom. You know, our future depends on it. So I just want to thank you for being our bold and impressive guest today. So good to have you on the show and be the recipient of your brilliant analysis. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
I hope you'll come back sometime. Will you do that?
My honor.
Oh,
be
great.
My honor.
Great.
Be my honor.
Thank you. What's up next on Be Bold America? On November 17th will be part 2 of our series on how California works. Mike Clancy will be sitting in for me, and he'll be continuing the discussion on a new book about how our beautiful state works. How California Works, Building Democracy in the Golden State, unlocks the mystery of how our state government operates and empowers you on how to create change. Mike will be speaking with the award-winning journalist and author Jonathan Vankin about our state democracy being messy, often frustrating, and always requiring compromise. But with enough work and a little smarts, it delivers. So please join Mike Clancy and Jonathan Vankin on November 17th at 5 p.m. for How California Works. As a reminder, Be Bold America is available as a podcast. Now you may listen to the show anytime for free by subscribing through your favorite podcast platform. And I want to say hello to our international listeners. We love that you support our program. I want to give a special thank you to our talented Be Bold America program engineer, Eliza James, and to our tireless program director, Howard Feldstein. You are listening to KSQD Santa Cruz and KSQD Prunedale. Many voices, one station. Listen worldwide online at ksqd.org. Stay tuned for State of Mind with Deborah Sloss. And remember, let your smile change the world. Don't let the world change your smile. My name is Jill Cody, and thank you for listening to Be Bold America. Until next time, keep, stop, start.